Welcome everybody to our Clinical Faculty Development Series 101. We are very excited to have Suzanne Miner presenting today on faculty development, planning for success. Susie is down at FIU at the Herbert Wortham College of Medicine, and I will let her further introduce herself and let her get started so we can wrap up on time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gary. My name is Susie Miner. I am a family medicine doctor. I work here at Florida International University. I see Joanna. Hi, Joanna. It's a pleasure to talk to you today, and I'm going to be talking to you today about clinical faculty development. So as you know, this is a series that the ACE, Alliance for Clinical Education, is putting on. You can get CME, more details about that I won't go into the details there. And this is a series. So this year, there's the 101, there's going to be a 201 and a 301. And there are further details here that you can look. But the main takeaway from this slide is the second Thursday of each month at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can block that off, knowing that there are going to be 9 webinars a year, but not in December, July, or August. So that's great information for you to have in advance. So today's presentation is on the faculty development chapter, and mark your calendar for next month is Larry Hertzby, and he's Educational Technology, March 10th. I'm looking forward to Larry's presentation. I met him in SGEA. So this is the 201 series and the 301 series. So the topics are already laid out, but of course not speakers yet. So today's chapter that we're presenting on, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. You guys can't see the advancing. I'm advancing, but you couldn't see the advancing. So this is the takeaway from this slide: 9 webinars per year, the second Thursday of the month. There we go. Today is faculty development. Next month is educational technology with Larry. And then this is the 201 and the 301 slides. So this is today's talk that I'm going to be doing. It's the Clerkship Director's Practical Guide to Faculty Development, Chapter 20. Plug for this book. I now have 2 editions of this book. My first edition I can't get rid of because it has so much writing in it and tabs in it, and I extensively have used it. So I highly recommend this book. It's an excellent book. It is indeed the guidebook for clerkship directors to have. So today I'm asking, and people are going to town, to put your name and your role and years in your role into the chat. And thank you so much for doing that. We have lots of participation already. There we go. And today's objectives, I want to talk to you about the need for faculty development. I often think of faculty development as like the stepchild. Like, we're going to have this amazing curriculum for the students, and oh yeah, we probably should develop the faculty too. Okay, we'll tell them what they need to do. But faculty are students too. So we're going to talk about that need to develop our faculty as well. And then I want to help you to think about your professional development needs with respect to developing a faculty development program, and then use Kern's model as a framework for constructing your faculty development program. So this is geared toward clerkship directors, but anyone who's a course director, I think, could benefit from this session, and anyone who is putting together curriculum, I think, can also benefit from this session. So this is the way I like to break presentations up. This is my outline. I'm going to start off with this idea of like why plan for faculty development. Then I want to talk about one's own professional development needs. Then we'll talk about Kern's 6 steps, and then some just logistical tips that I hope will help you to take away to be successful with faculty development as you move forward. So first off, why plan for faculty development? So it's an accreditation requirement, right? We often talk about things in terms of accreditation, like that's like the big thing that we always need to consider. I also think of the fact that I just want to have excellent students out there, right? Excellent future physicians. So the LCME, I pulled the standard. It's 4.5, faculty professional development. A medical school and or its sponsoring institution provides opportunities for professional development to each faculty member in the areas of discipline content, curricular design, which is what we're talking about today, program evaluation, student assessment methods, instructional methodology, and research to enhance his or her skills and leadership abilities in these areas. So the LCME is telling us you need to prepare your faculty for their roles, whatever their roles may be, and that they outline a bunch of different skills or areas that your faculty should be for and that you should be developed for. This is very meta because there's faculty development and then there's you preparing for the faculty, and there are all kinds of layers of professional development here. So faculty need to be prepared for their roles, that the LCME is telling us that. And then we know that over here on the right side of the screen that directing a clerkship is a skill set. Teaching on a clerkship is a skill set. And both of these are skills that many of us as faculty have never been formally trained to do, where we often kind of figure it out for ourselves. I really have been grateful to STFM, the Society of Teachers of Family Medicine, for MSETI. It's a medical student educator development institute. And that really was my way of figuring out, okay, what's this being a clerkship director thing all about? I should have said that in my introduction. I apologize. So I started at FIU in 2010 after working in the public sector with an underserved community for about 10 years. And then I was clerkship director for about 6 years, and now I'm the assistant dean for faculty development. So I have been in that clerkship director role, and now I help develop our clerkship directors as well around faculty development. So I think of our goal, why do we have medical education? My goal in helping our students to grow is to graduate stem cell pluripotent graduates from medical school who will be lifelong learners, who value patient care and safety and well-being, and consider the system in which we practice. So there certainly are more domains to this. My short version in my head is, I want this person to be a doctor that I would be willing to send my loved ones to in the future. That's my short way of thinking about it. I want them to give excellent care to everyone who walks through the door. And hopefully that's the main reason. So yes, the LCME says that we should develop faculty to make sure that they're ready for their roles, but we also want to develop faculty so we can train these graduates for their future roles. So we have this gap between the need with LCME and the skill set of needing to do it, and faculty development actually bridges that gap between faculty being charged with needing to teach and direct a clerkship and faculty learning and actually practicing and applying these skills. Oh, and I use some art throughout this. All of it is Creative Commons or free downloads. And I have the link at the bottom just to be sure that I'm not pirating anything. So now let's talk about your specific needs if you're a clerkship director or a course director. So in the chapter, then it lists several roles in table 20.1. So a visionary, a QI or quality improvement supervisor, accountability champion, that's a really important role. You are the head teacher or the lead teaching and educational resource. You also serve as the advocate, an administrator, a counselor, and a cultural architect. So let's dig a little bit more into that. What does that mean? So there's a lot going on this slide. Don't be afraid. On the left side, I have all of those roles listed out. And then from the literature and from this chapter, I put some skills for each of these roles. And I'm so grateful. Joanna Draus and I, with the team, have been working on this idea of how do we develop clerkship directors? So I pulled a little bit from our work as well for this table. So some of the skills for each role. Visionary is constructing and communicating the vision for the clerkship, not just to students, but to miscellaneous stakeholders who might be involved in the clerkship. Patients, even staff, faculty, leadership, committees, HR. The visionary role is also developing and revising the curriculum and faculty development. They also are aligning the curriculum with the department, school, and national goals. Excuse me. As a QI or quality improvement supervisor, so this is the second row, then the clerkship director is promoting the quality of the clerkship and quality improvement of the clerkship. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today in terms of faculty development. The QI supervisor is also completing and disseminating scholarship. So often this isn't built into our role, but it really is an assumed part of our role that we are going to disseminate, complete and disseminate scholarship, whether that be presentations, publications, presenting to a community, committee, what have you. As an accountability champion, this is the third row, then the clerkship director is assessing the educational impact of the clerkship and constructing appropriate assessments. And that actually plays into what we're talking about today a little bit with faculty development. And then the fourth row is that the clerkship, excuse me, I got tongue-tied, director is the lead teaching and educational resource. So they're disseminating the best pedagogical practices for classroom and clinical settings, right? Because you might have didactics on your clerkship as well. And often they're looked to as a role model by other faculty and as students who are one day going to become our colleagues. The next row is as an advocate, advocating for students, faculty, and staff, and applying emotional intelligence in decisions and communications. And then also as administrator, developing clerkship policies, practices, and managing clerkship staff as well. Also managing sites, like clinical sites for your students, managing time and budget. So personal leadership skills is what I think of those skills. And then as a counselor, listening and communicating and mentoring and advising faculty, staff, and students. And then cultural architect. I'm really excited that this was included by the chapter author. The clerkship director is ensuring a culture of feedback, respect, accountability, and trust that's reflected across all of the clinical sites and at the College of Medicine itself. So the reason I wanted to put this in this particular chart for you is the next step that I want to encourage you to make is actually to look over in the row at the very side, the PD priorities. So what does PD priority mean? I want you to consider in your role right now, where do you need professional development so that you can serve these various roles? So I really encourage you to take a moment, because I don't think often when we're in this role as a clerkship director that we take the time to do this. That we actually take the time to think, okay, like, where am I at and where do I need to grow? We often help our staff grow, our faculty grow, our students grow, but we often aren't considering what we need to do to grow. So I want to encourage you to take a moment and think about where you want to grow personally. And you're welcome to put that in the chat. There's no pressure though, if you don't want to. What is QI? Quality improvement. QI is quality improvement, and FD is faculty development for the duration of this presentation. So after you've thought about what roles and skills you want to develop for yourself as a clerkship director, then I want to encourage you to think about how you can gain those skills. So there's some professional development skills professional development activities that you might consider. Informal mentoring is huge. That certainly played a really important role for me. Conferences, also major role for me personally. And many of us get a lot out of conferences, not just the formal sessions that conferences often offer, but also those moments where we're in the hallway with folks and we're talking about various issues. We were talking about this before this session started. Also sitting next to somebody at lunch and you realize, oh my goodness, I do that, you do that, and all of those different areas. And then there are formal faculty development programs. I've already said STFM's MSETI helped me a lot. I'm a family medicine doctor, so I've personally experienced those. But most academic societies offer some kind of faculty development for clerkship directors in their field. Harvard Macy also has some faculty development programs that are formal. And the AAMC offers early, mid, and late career development for women and minorities that is also very, very useful. And then your site or institution might offer trainings in development or formal mentoring programs that might be helpful for you. Academic society interest groups. I have been a member of the SGEA, the Southern Group on Educational Affairs, that's GEA. FD is faculty development, SIG is special interest group, and that's been such a lovely experience for me. We just had an article accepted yesterday, so I'm really excited about that. But academic society interest groups can be really, really helpful. They're a place for you to get to know other folks, make sure you're not staying siloed, keep your fingers on the pulse of medical education. And then literature, I actually have, I'll give you some specific tips later on how you can tap into the literature, but doing a lit search is really useful. The ACE guidebook is another great example of a piece of literature that I certainly have on my shelf and go to. And then some might consider a graduate degree. For the time and investment and energy that you might put into a graduate degree, It might not help you as much with being a clerkship director. It might help you with other areas of your career trajectory, but it might also help you with certain skills as a clerkship director. So now that we've talked about those two items, why plan for faculty development? Yes, it's important to plan. And two, what are your professional development needs? I really want to dig into some of the meat of this, the heart of this matter. I want to use Kern's 6-step approach as a model for developing a faculty development program for your clerkship. So there's a lot on this slide, don't be afraid. In the left corner, this is the cover of the Kern's book, the most recent edition. I'm a big fan. I have 2 of this edition also on my shelf, and I can't throw it away because the first one has all the tabs of when I was learning how to be a clerkship director. And then here in the middle is the meat of the Kern's 6-step approach. So step 1, and we'll go through these a little bit more, but the first step is to identify the problem and do a general needs assessment. Step 2 is a targeted needs assessment. Step 3 is goals and specific objectives. Step 4, educational strategies. Step 5, implementation. And step 6, evaluation and feedback. So I want to point out a few things holistically about this, and then let's dig into the details a little bit. Kern's 6-step approach is often used for student curriculum development, but I have found that it's really useful for any curriculum development, for instance, faculty development. When I'm thinking about developing faculty as a holistic program and a comprehensive program that I want to approach, Kern's is an excellent way for me to think about that, because I can think about it overall and the 30,000-foot view and then dive into the details using Kern's framework. It also can be used for project management, and I'm going to come back, but I want to give you a little nugget there and come back to that in a little bit. Oh, somebody put, what is IMSETI? So IMSETI is Medical Student Educator Development Institute. It is offered by STFM. It is one of the ways that academic society helps to develop educational leaders and faculty. But I'm almost positive that I have seen that almost every academic society, family medicine, ComSep, psychiatry, internal medicine, they all offer some version of deep training. You just have to look for it at the academic society. So I also want to point out on this slide that a curriculum could be one discrete session or one discrete objective, but it could also be the overall curriculum. And I think of it as like a fractal, like broccoli. A fractal means that there are repeating patterns into infinity. The pattern just repeats itself. And I have an example of a piece of broccoli here. I've never seen this particular species of broccoli, but this is the one that comes up when you put fractal in. But when you look at an objective or a curriculum, then you can look at it, it repeats itself. It's the same pattern that repeats itself. So it is indeed a fractal of itself. And then I also want to point out the fact that there are all kinds of lines in the middle of this, and it's not to make like a pretty star design. The point of all of these lines in the middle of this image is that it is not a linear, progressive, like orderly structure. When you're going through and considering developing a curriculum, then you're going to think about one, but you're doing step 1, but you're thinking about 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. So no matter what we're doing at the moment, it's an organic process, and we're often fluidly transitioning among all of the steps. And I do want to give a plug for MedEd models. They allowed me to use their Kern's image here. It was the best one that I could find that really showed all of that fluidity and that ability to transition between different steps. So now let's dig in a little bit with Kern's. So step 1 is problem identification and general needs assessment. So you can see here, that's in the upper middle. Here we want to characterize the problem, and we want to assess the gap between the current and the ideal approach to whatever the problem is. And this is in general, not particular to your university or your faculty or your learners. In step 2, that's when we do a targeted needs assessment, and we're applying what we learned in step 1 to our specific circumstance of our patient population or our students or our faculty or our setting. Step 3, we are developing goals and objectives. So I'll dig into this a little bit more as we go into each of these. I want to think about what the goal is of the faculty development program or curriculum or session that I'm doing, and then create some SMART objectives. And we'll talk more about what SMART objectives means. Step 4 is the educational strategy. How is this curriculum, these objectives that I have now developed, how will I be delivering those in terms of faculty development? And then 5 is implementation. I want to construct an implementation plan on how I'm going to roll this thing out. And then step 6 is evaluation and feedback. How is the curriculum impact assessed and what was the impact? And then I want to do quality improvement and roll that back in. Often, I know I heard lots and lots of times it's going to be at least 3 years, Susie, before you're happy with your curriculum. And yes, it got better and better each year. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I was never perfectly happy with my curriculum. But quality improvement is built into the cycle. It's natural and appropriate and lawful that quality improvement is going to improve every time you roll through the cycle. So there are lots of possible applications for Kern 6 Steps approach as a faculty development model. So here are a few specific examples. In the orange, faculty have asked for direction on how to write a strong letter of recommendation. So I could put together a curriculum on how do I help faculty understand like how to write a strong letter. Or in the pink, faculty would like to know more about how to mentor learners. I had that question asked of me by a few of our sites down here. So I've had to put together some curriculum on that. In the blue, students don't feel they're receiving adequate feedback from clinical faculty. So maybe I'm hearing that in midpoint feedbacks when I'm meeting with students when they come back to campus, or maybe I'm seeing that written by students in the clerkship evaluation, but students feel like they're not getting adequate feedback. Or in the purple, I'd like to improve the quality of the comments that faculty are writing on the end of rotation assessments. Or you might get this information from your dean of assessment or the dean that writes those letters, the dean's letters, the medical student education performance letters, paragraphs, and how do we help to improve those comments? Or in the green, that students at a particular site are reporting consistently that they don't know what to do for the first few days, and they're kind of figuring it out on their own. So I could develop a curriculum for that site about how to orient the learner and how to set them up for success. I also could just do a SWOT analysis of my clerkship, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats with respect to faculty development and think about what I need to do moving forward. So there are lots of opportunities. And I wanted to point out that there's no one specific way to come up with faculty development needs or how you are going to approach faculty development. I wanted to offer lots of examples here. I see Romanesco yum. That's the broccoli. So again, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to take you through each step now, and let's talk about it. So step 1, problem identification and general needs assessment. So 1, what is the problem requiring addressing? Like, what is the problem that needs addressing in this situation? And then what is the scope of the problem? Whom and what does the problem affect? We also want to think about the degree of urgency. Is this an immediate intervention situation like a Title IX issue, or does a student feel unsafe? Those would be more immediate faculty development needs that I would have to quickly move on. And also, what is currently being done about the problem? And then what is the ideal approach to address the problem? So I'm giving you the generic step 1 questions that we apply for any problem identification and general needs assessment. And I'm going to take us through using this example of students don't feel that they're getting adequate feedback from their clinical faculty. So in the blue box, the lighter blue box, I list areas or places that you can obtain information. So these questions are asking us, what's currently being done to address this problem? Tell us more about the problem. Who does it affect? What's the ideal approach to address this problem? So we can obtain information from PubMed. I can certainly look up the issue at my library or on PubMed. MedEd Portal is an excellent resource to see what's currently being done about the problem. Textbooks like the ACE Handbook, also excellent resources as well. I just saw a mentoring book that was coming out that I'm excited about reading more about. And then the ACGME and the LCME standards. So if there are educational standards out there like these, really useful to go to. The EPAs and the milestones are also standards that we can look to about what's being done and what's the ideal approach. Listservs, so useful. STFM, I'm on one of their listservs. SGEA, Faculty Development Listserv, is quite excellent. The DRED, the Dr. Ed listserv, excellent. I can't say enough about listservs. I certainly am considerate about how I use listservs, but every time I put an important question out there, I get so much information back. Faculty are so helpful in turning and giving information on the listservs. So what are listservs? That's a heavy question. I will come back to that, Ashley. I'll talk to you about that in the end because I feel like that's a little outside the scope, but the quick answer is you can sign up to be on a listserv. It's an email group that you can get more information from. It's kind of a community of practice in a way. So there are also some really excellent podcasts out there as well. The AAMC has a leadership series podcast. They have an excellent podcast on being a peer reviewer. Key Lime, excellent podcast. I feel so in touch with MedEd, and especially during the pandemic. I feel like the 4 people on Key Lime really were in my living room, and we were having a conversation and getting geeked out with MedEd stuff, which is really fun. And then academic societies, ACE, the Alliance for Clinical Education, the AAMC, ComCEP, the AAIM, there are all these different academic societies out there that you also might be able to get information from. On their web pages, they usually have various resources available for members that you can tap into. So when we're thinking about step 1, and we've identified the problem, which is students don't feel like they're getting adequate feedback, I'm looking to all of these different resources in this light blue box about where I can find like what's currently being done to address the problem and what is the ideal approach to address the problem. So this is where I'm obtaining all of this information. And some considerations that the chapter points out that you might want to have in the back of your head as you're going through step 1 is you probably need to be aware of evolving pedagogical practices, also consideration for onboarding new sites and faculty as you're doing this, and that probably many correction directors, most of us, I know I was, we're practicing it with limited resources. That yes, there's an ideal approach out there, but we might not be able to apply it to our site because we do have limited resources. So it's in the back of my head. It's not running everything that I'm doing, but it is there. So I wanted to ask in the chat, what do you think the ideal approach might be to address this problem of students don't feel like they're receiving adequate feedback? I'm just scanning through the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything else. I think I've been able to answer. Oh, Andrea said, I'm often struggle with following up on QI and program evaluation in my role. It's always just working. Understood. And Andrea said, same way. Agreed. And taking time to pursue scholarship on that great work. Totally a growth opportunity. Agreed. I think that QI committees, quality improvement committees that most of us have at our institutions, they're really valuable for that, and accreditation really valuable because it reminds us, yes, we need to do that QI. We need to get our data and then plug it in. So Karina wrote, sometimes they don't know you're giving them feedback unless you specifically specify that you're giving them feedback. Absolutely. That was one of the issues I had to learn is I needed to label it. And asking students for more details, clarification, if recognizing feedback was given, access to forms, excellent. Those are absolutely some ideal opportunities for how to address this problem with feedback. So let's go to step 2. Oh, and Nicole said being explicit as well when giving feedback and saying, my feedback is, I agree. I like to say, I'm going to do feedback now, everybody. Setting up systems to ensure feedback, like a feedback Friday. Well said, Andrea. So step 2, a Kern 6-step approach, is a targeted needs assessment. So in step 1, we identified the problem and we looked at in general what the problem was. Now we're going to target in. We're going to hone down or hone in. What is the situation at my site? How do I apply what I learned in step 1 to my site, my institution, my learners, my faculty, my setting? So let's talk about this generically first. So these are the items that are listed in Kern's second step, but also as well in the chapter that we're presenting on today. So who is the targeted audience? Who will this project engage? So yes, students are involved in this, but I'm getting development to faculty, particularly to help them with feedback. But it could be students, it could be faculty. So this is a really important question. Who is the audience? Hopefully, I hope to impact students, but it's probably through faculty development. Number 2 here is describe the existing proficiencies, experience, performance, and knowledge gaps. So this is when I'm going to kind of be an investigator, and I'm going to do a deep dive. What have I been doing in this area? What are my faculty doing? What do the students say on past evaluations about feedback that they're receiving? What have I done in terms of faculty development around feedback before with this group? What have we offered about faculty feedback, faculty development with feedback? And number 3, what information about them is unknown to you? Strategize about how to learn this information. So if you don't know something, think about how you can obtain information. And then you want to summarize that gathered data and think about what the proposed size and scope of your project is and the anticipated impact of the project and the degree of change involved. So even though I'm just on step 2 right now, I'm referencing step 1. I want to point out the fluidity and the transition here, but I'm also thinking about the implementation of the project, which is further down the line, and the anticipated impact of the project, which is further along as well in step 6. So even though I'm just on step 2, I'm still thinking about this as a holistic circle. So when you're thinking about gathering information that you might not know yet, like what's unknown to you, in this light blue box, you can obtain information from focus groups. You can obtain information from surveys. For instance, the GQ has a question there on midpoint feedback. You might have conversations with your students, such as at midpoint, but also clerkship evaluations and reviews often have this information. So there are lots of places that you can get more information and more details about your specific site with respect to feedback. And then the book points out some considerations that you want to have in the back of your head. Who are your stakeholders? And that they include not just the students, but also the faculty and patients as well. And I should have put staff in here as well. Staff are really, really important stakeholders as well. And then we as faculty, so I serve this assistant dean role, but I'm also a faculty in the clinic. And in that role, we have less time to teach and increasing productivity demands. So there are, when I'm thinking about who my targeted audience is, this faculty member, I also need to really respect that they've got a lot of stuff, other stuff going on. They're not just teaching students, they're seeing patients, they have productivity demands, and they have less time to teach. And we know that adding a student usually does add a certain amount of time to the day, depending on what that person's teaching style is. And then our faculty might be burned out. And in the book, it even says, not so empathetic. Our faculty, because they do have so many demands, they might not be prioritizing teaching. It might be lower on their priority scale than other needs that they have to meet right now. And especially during COVID, we've seen some of that every now and then. I have to say, though, faculty are so happy to have students in the clinical setting because it's a degree of normalcy, which I've been really excited about. So that's step 2, is that targeted needs assessment. So step 3 is to develop goals and objectives. So generically, what are the broad goals of the faculty development curriculum? But then let's go into the fractal of our broccoli. What is the goal of this specific item? What is the goal in terms of trying to impact this question of students not feeling that they're receiving adequate feedback? And then I want to construct some smart learning goals, or smart learning objectives, I should say, using Bloom's taxonomy. So during this talk, I'm talking about some major med ed phrases. So Kern's is one really important med ed phrase. And then Bloom's taxonomy, it's all about the verb. I love Bloom's. It's so helpful. So let's talk about Bloom's a little bit more. So this pyramid that I pulled, there are lots of Bloom's pyramids and shapes out there if you Google it. At the lowest level, then this is where the person is just touching base with the material that you're presenting. And when you remember, that's the lowest base. Often our tests are multiple choice questions, right? So we're actually just touching on remembering something or recognizing something, recalling or defining something. That's remember. And then as we move up on the pyramid, then the stakeholder is really working with the material in a much more meaningful way. So here you can see moving from remembering to understanding. So verbs under understand, I don't like understand as a Bloom's taxonomy verb to use in an objective, because how in the world do you assess that? But if you say describe, discuss, locate, recognize, report, that's a little higher level. That's a little bit more meaningful. Apply is the next level, and apply is a totally legitimate verb. Execute, implement, solve, use, demonstrate, interpret, operate. So lots of verbs that you can use there. Next is analyze. Analyze, when we think about analyzing, we're often comparing something to a set of information or a standard or a rubric. So analyzing a situation, compare, contrast, distinguish, examine, question, test, all different verbs that you could use at that level. Evaluate is the next level. Appraise, argue, evaluate, and analyze are pretty close for me. And then create, design, assemble, construct, which is what we're doing today, is we're talking about creating a faculty development curriculum around this question of students not feeling like they receive adequate feedback. Yes, the slides will be shared. So I wanted to ask you in your chat, if this is our problem that we've identified in step 1, that students don't feel like they're receiving adequate feedback, what could a learning objective be for improving feedback? So as you're thinking about that, consider what verb you want to use. And there's no right or wrong answers here. And then I'm going to go back to our generic areas here on the left. So we've talked about thinking about the broad goals of the faculty development curriculum. Probably a broad goal for this question, this problem that we've identified around feedback, is I want students to report that they're receiving adequate feedback. I want students to receive adequate feedback. So that's probably the broad goal of my curriculum. And then if you can think of some SMART objectives that you might put in the chat about how you might implement this, like what would the learning objective be? And we'll talk more about learning objectives. I know I'm jumping the gun on this. And then even as I'm thinking about step 3, I'm thinking also about step 6, considering project evaluation, because the learning objective needs to be in alignment with the learning activity and the evaluation. So even though I'm thinking about this step right now, I am also in my head going to that next one. So we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about that. Rosalie said, use the good, better, how method. Oh, to deliver feedback. That's a wonderful learning objective after every PBL session. And Jimei said, evaluate and synthesize patterns of feedback perceived from preceptors for personal growth. That's really high level. I'm going to go back for a second. There we go. That's really high level on the pyramid of Bloom's taxonomy. And the learning objective could be provide feedback on a weekly basis that is deemed useful to the student. Absolutely, Andrea, well said. And then Nancy, based on earlier comments, students will recognize verbal cues feedback. Perfect. Those are all excellent learning objectives. So when we think about our learning objective, I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is step 4 with educational strategies. I want to align it with our educational strategies. So whatever the objective is, I want to align that. And I'll have a chart coming up in just a minute that we can use to flesh that out a little bit more. So the generic questions that we want to consider for step 4, even though we're on a step, we're still thinking about this organically and transitioning back and forth fluidly across all of these steps. So what is the faculty development to be delivered? And using what educational models am I going to deliver this faculty development? So number 2, is this aligned with stakeholder needs and setting? And how can I align this with the stakeholder needs and the settings? And the stakeholders are patients, staff, students, faculty. And then 3, consider opportunities, barriers, and threats to delivering this faculty development to our faculty. 4 is consider the project evaluation. So again, even though I'm on step 4, I'm still thinking about what does success look like in this situation? And how does it align with learning objectives? So faculty development delivery strategies in the purple box might be, oh, you don't have the purple box yet. There it is. Sorry about that. So Site visits, I might want to visit sites individually. I might put together an e-module that is online about delivering feedback to students. I might want to put a workshop together and invite everyone for that. I might put information in a newsletter that I send out to all of the faculty. I might create a longitudinal program that I embed feedback in. I might put information on a web page. And 7, I put ... because I'm sure there are other things that we could do with faculty development delivery that I'm not thinking about here. So in the chat, what do you think are some possible realistic faculty development strategies that we could do for improving feedback? So Andrea said a clinical teaching observation to see how a faculty member provides feedback. Absolutely. So that's where site visits can be done. One of my colleagues, who is excellent, actually goes to observe students at their site. And while they're observing the student, they also can check in with faculty when they're observing students' histories and physicals. A flipped classroom session with active learning at its core. That's a great idea, Charles. Giving them feedback on how to improve feedback. Excellent. Well said, Andrea. And in MODA, many faculty would like to improve their skills but have limited time and want the Cliff Notes and high yield version, absolutely, such as a 5-minute module. That's true. I also could have put a podcast here. I'm listening to a great podcast by the Curbsiders on feedback right now, actually. Self-assessment by the faculty, Nancy. Well said, everybody. Feedback from the students as well. Well said, Jaime. So this is the kind of chart that I almost always make when I'm putting together when I'm going through a curriculum. So learning objective is the first column, educational strategy is the second column, and the third column is assessment. So learning objective, that's step 3 in Kern's 6-step, educational strategy, step 4 in Kern's 6 steps, and assessment is step 6, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we'll tease it out, because whenever I'm at this step, even at step 2, I am always thinking about this chart. This chart is always in my head, or realistically, I printed it out and I'm writing it out because I'm pretty visual, or I have an Excel file that I'm putting my curriculum together using. So here, with students not feeling that they're receiving adequate feedback, I just put 3 learning objectives here on what I might do. So the first one, faculty recognize the three feedback frameworks, and certainly there are many feedback frameworks out there. So recognize is the Bloom's taxonomy verb for this particular learning objective. And the educational strategy for that one might be a reading assignment, maybe a newsletter assignment. It could be an interactive live session that I do by Zoom at 7 a.m. or noon or 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., depending on what the faculty needs are, or I might offer it several times. And the assessment for that, maybe I'll put a CME quiz at the end of the reading or the session, just like we're doing today, right? You're getting CME for this faculty development session. CME is of value to our faculty. And so that's something that is usually pretty easy that we can do for our faculty to help them with that, with receiving value. And let's look at the second learning objective here. So faculty practice facilitating a feedback conversation. So our Bloom's taxonomy verb is practice. So it's a little higher up than recognize, which is lower on our pyramid for Bloom's. And the educational strategy for that might be an interactive live session by Zoom with role play. So I might present a feedback or a feedback framework on how to give feedback, but then have people break off into small groups and do some role play. And then the assessment for that might be a feedback rubric that could be used during the session by participants, and they could give formative feedback to each other. So another learning objective, this third one, might be that faculty apply a feedback framework weekly. And this was very similar to, I think, what Andrea said in the chat. So apply here is the Bloom's taxonomy verb. And then the educational strategy would be maybe a newsletter article, a site visit to deliver the information. I could do actually a student session on asking for and receiving feedback. because students are a stakeholder in this too, right? So I know at quite a few schools, they're doing more and more sessions on helping students to ask for and receive feedback, to break down some of the barriers for faculty with delivering feedback. And then assessment for that learning objective of applying a feedback framework weekly might be that students turn in a completed plus Delta card at midpoint and at the end of the rotation. So I realize I should probably explain what a plus Delta card is. I show an example here in the bottom right of a plus Delta card. It's an index card that you keep in your pocket, plus on one side, Delta on the other. Plus is, this is what this student did well. Delta is, this is what this student can improve. I do a version of this in clinic that I took from this. When we're doing feedback with students, of course, label it. I have them email me their information on what they did well and what they can improve, and then I keep those comments. It's an electronic version of a plus Delta card, but that might be an assessment activity that you could use to say, all right, this is how I'm going to assess that this worked. So any thoughts or questions on this? Because for me, when I got this table, as a clerkship director, this is when Kern's just made sense. This is when Kern's was like, oh, I get it now. All right, team, we'll keep going. But if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. So step 5, implementation. And again, fluid, it's not a linear process, as it says down here in the bottom right in the pink box. So I want to construct a plan for faculty development, and I want to include deliverables, benchmarks, scheduling, accountability, resources, really important. Thanks to Zoom now, we don't have to reserve rooms necessarily if we're doing something, but if we are doing something live, like what personnel do we need, what materials, what spacing, required support, institutional or external, administrative support, and potential barriers as well, and a communication plan. It's really, really important to have a plan for how you're gonna roll this out and communicate what you're rolling out. And think about who can help you think creatively about resources and implementation strategies so you aren't working on this in a silo yourself. And again, consider project evaluation, which is step 6. What does success look like? Which we're always doing. And that was in that last slide. Step 6 has to do with what success looks like, this assessment area. Now, step 6 is evaluation and feedback. We've been teasing this the whole time so far. So I'm going to throw out another big med-ed framework, Kirkpatrick's evaluation model. So this is a simplified version of Kirkpatrick's. I put this one together, so I didn't credit anybody for this particular item. Step 6, you're thinking, what does success look like? And what are my outcome measures that show my success, that show that this curriculum is successful, or that shows or demonstrates the impact of the curriculum that I put together? So let's go up on Kirkpatrick's. Again, just like Bloom's, as you move upward on the pyramid, as you go higher on the levels, you are interacting more in a more meaningful manner. So level 1 is a reaction. And in the orange box, what is the reaction of the faculty learner? Were they satisfied with the development program? Did they enjoy it? Did they perceive value? So that's level 1. Is usually like, okay, so what did your learner stakeholder perceive about this activity that you've done? Level 2 is actually the learning. So in the orange box, what was the measurable learning that they had? Did faculty increase their knowledge? If so, how? Level 3, is there a change in behavior? So level 3 in the orange box, what observable changes in behavior occurred? Did faculty demonstrate knowledge in action? Did performance change? And if so, how? And level 4, this is the highest level that you can get on the Kirkpatrick's model, is what was the impact of the faculty development program for the organization or the society? And that's results. Like, that's what we're going for. Often we are not able to fully assess Kirkpatrick's because there's so many factors involved, but when we can go to the highest, I should say, often we can't evaluate the highest level of Kirkpatrick's, but when we can, it is golden. That's the grail. That's what we are going for. There we go. So I want to take a moment. Let's put some information in the chat here. So I've labeled in the assessment column A, B, and C. So a CME quiz at the end of reading our session what Kirkpatrick's level is that? So you could put in the chat A and then a number for what Kirkpatrick's level is that. So if we're putting together that CME quiz at the end of a reading session, what Kirkpatrick's level is that? So for A, what is that one? Now I'm getting some A2s. That's right. So this is knowledge, and that's exactly right. This is knowledge. This is there measurable learning? Yes, lots of A2s are running in. So now let's go to B. So same thing, same question. So for B, what level of Kirkpatrick's are we doing now? So if there's a feedback rubric that's used that could be used during the session by participants, what is that one? Yeah, so Penny, B3, maybe just a 2, B3. Yeah, so this is open, right? This is open a little bit for interpretation on which level it is. Is it B2? Is it B3? I think it's probably B3, but we could perceive it as B2. And then what about C? Students turn in a completed plus delta card at midpoint and at the end of the rotation. Just have Zhao Mei. So C4, C3, C3, C4. So again, I agree. It's open to interpretation a little bit, right? So there is an observable change in behavior if students are turning in a card, but actually this is what we're looking for, is this impact. So it could be C3, it could be level 3, it could be level 4. I completely agree with you that it could be either of those levels. So I hope that was really useful for you. I'm so excited with how this came together, because it occurred to me that we actually could apply and have some learning activities while we were doing this session. So now I'm going to transition. We have really dug into Kerns. Like our sleeves are rolled up. We've really been into Kerns. I want to give you some logistical tips that you can take away. So one is that relationships. Faculty development program is foundationally built on relationships. I cannot say that enough. So important. Zoom is really useful for furthering relationships or continuing a relationship, but it's hard to develop a relationship by Zoom. It's really important to get out there, shake people's hands, look people in the eye, so that when there is an issue that comes up in the clerkship, you can easily call them or reach out to them, or, hey, checking in, what's going on with this issue? What's your thoughts? I need your input. So relationships. And then creativity, perseverance, flexibility, really important characteristics as well to cultivate as a clerkship director who's putting together a faculty development program. Another area I encourage is to assume positive intent. So assuming, hang in there, I think we have, there we go. Assuming positive intent, really useful. This is one of the keys to my success when I was a clerkship director, is to assume positive intent. It helps me pause, ask clarifying questions, and connect in a more meaningful way. And I don't actually know where I got this. This is in the business literature. I got this quote specifically from Harvard Business Review. And then The Power of Pause is an excellent book. It's by Nance Gilmartin. I get no money from you reading this book, but she talks about actually putting a sticker or a Curious George doll in your office to remind yourself to get curious, to take that moment and don't blame, don't go down the rabbit hole, but pause for a second and get curious. And that's her step towards, like, how do we assume positive intent? So assuming positive intent, really helpful tip as you're building your faculty development program. And then stay current. So there are quite a few ways to stay current. I just learned a few weeks ago that when you download the LCME standards, if you download 2 of them, you can go into Word, because you download them as a Word document. You can click the review tab, and then you can click compare, and it will show you what is updated. So this is a different version of track changes, but that way you can stay current with what happened with this most recent standard of the LCME. For years, I tried to figure out, well, how do I tell what they changed from year to year? Because I don't have track changes on these. Well, this is how you can do it, by clicking review and then compare. I get monthly lit searches from the NCBI on a few different keywords. Faculty development is one of them. Feedback is one of them. Medical education is another keyword that I have. A colleague says QXMD does the same thing for her. We've talked about conferences, webinars like this. Podcast, really, really useful. Key Lime, I've already talked a little bit about. Faculty Factory, really useful as far as leadership goes and being a faculty member. Curbsiders Teach is an excellent one that literally yesterday I heard about and or started listening to. I actually was a guest podcast speaker, and that's how I know about that one. Excellent, excellent mini series that you can get free CME for. So this actually is a card that I give our clerkship directors on what you must orient or what you must cover when you're orienting faculty to clinical teaching. So this is faculty development in the pocket. So this is a physical card that they hand out. So what needs to be taught or what they should be teaching faculty, how to teach it, how to assess. Our CASP is something that we have at our College of Medicine, and then policies and practices that they should go over. So this physical card might be really useful for you to give to your clerkship directors, or if you're a clerkship director to have. And this is the other side of that card, the basics of feedback, some basics for assessing, and then some resources that we offer here at the College of Medicine that I work at. But something like this might be really useful and concrete that sites could have. And then come at it with a scholarship mindset. This is so, so, so important. And I think absolutely one of the secrets of my success. So here's Kern's. We've already talked through Kern's, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you can frame everything that you're doing through the lens of scholarship, through the mindset of scholarship, then you get 2 outputs for every work item. You get the work, but then you also get the scholarship that you're doing. There are 2 additional steps that you would need to do. You might want to consider an IRB, of course. I actually have an IRB over my whole faculty development program. So that way I don't have to do an individual IRB for each item. I just have an IRB that encompasses everything. And then the dissemination step, you're already doing the quality improvement. You're already doing those steps of what success looks like. The next step is to disseminate it. At a conference, I love to do it at a conference first and then write it up. And then this is the end of our talk today. So what questions do you have, your take-home messages? And please complete the evaluation that Gary's going to email out to everyone. So questions, how are you able to provide feedback to faculty twice a year? We have the rule of 5 evaluations, which limits the amount of feedback going out to faculty. So one of the ways that we do that is our clerkships send that out at midpoint and at the end of the year. We don't want to do it more often than that because then students might not be anonymous anymore in the feedback. But certainly if there's an urgent issue, then we would reach out to the faculty more quickly. Don't you get in trouble with the LCME for doing that? No, that's actually a requirement. We need to give faculty feedback at least twice per year on their comments. If you do it more often, students might not be anonymous, and that's a big no-no. Any other questions or take-homes? Yeah, I packed a lot in. Thank you, Nancy. I hope it wasn't too jam-packed. I love this topic and I get a little geeky about it. My pleasure, Andrea. Thanks, Charles.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Susie, for doing this for us today. The email with the handout and a link for the evaluation will be coming in the next 15 minutes. And then once this gets downloaded, more than likely I'll have the recording loaded on our website tomorrow. So that way, if you go to the allianceforclinical-education.org, you'll be able to go and find links to this presentation as well as our previous ones that have been done. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.